Lightning like Steve McQueen. I'm in the fast lane when the light turns green. And I built tough, I ain't nothing but grit. Cause I made rugged blood, sweat, and spit. Yeah, like a horse I fly. Better push yourself in for a bumpy ride. I like to play hard, but I work harder. And I weather the storm cause I'm built stronger.
What is up, ladies and gentlemen? We are back. We are live. It is the Freight Coach Podcast, the top podcast in transportation, coming to you guys every single weekday, 8:30 a.m. Pacific, 10:30 Central, to break down some industry headlines. But most importantly, you guys provide some actual insight into what you can do with all of this information. I'm going to save the rest of the intro. You guys know what's up. We had a little bit of technical difficulties here this morning, but this is the real world, you guys. Nothing is going to go perfect out there, but we're always going to figure it out. We're going to make it happen, and that's what we're doing today. And I got a repeat guest on the show. He's a good friend of mine. He's out in Denver, Colorado. He's got a fleet. They've built up their company. We're going to talk about that, kind of what's going on in the world of the asset side of the industry. So I got my man, Anes Balic with Balic Transportation, back on the show. What's going on, brother? How are you?
Not bad, man. Sorry for the technical difficulties this morning.
Dude, we're not tech people, all right? Like, we have day jobs. We're just podcasters as well.
we could get the freight, but this technical stuff is a little bit challenging.
Dude, yeah. I know, I'm right there with you. I've spent so much time, probably a lot longer than I needed to, for so much, just trying to like actually understand how most of this work. And I don't understand how most of it works now. But fortunately, I have some people behind the scenes now who help me out with all of this shit. So
IT department is good then, huh?
Yeah, dude. IT, my guy Christian, who just does all my editing now. I can just come in and talk shit and leave, which is that's my specialty.
That's beautiful, man.
Dude, so what's new, man? How's everything going out in your neck of the woods?
It's going good, man. I mean, business last year was kind of up and down, mostly down across the year. We've seen some peak seasons finally, when they were supposed to be peak, which we noticed, trends in the rates going up. But, first quarter is like normal. We were seeing volumes kind of go down. Certain customers are, just getting back into the groove of things. A lot of that has to do with, I'm sure, the election. People are kind of still, uneasy on what's going to happen and stuff like that. But I'm hoping for a good, comeback in 2025.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you, man. I'm an optimistic realist, is how I like to put it. And, I'm out there really just controlling my controllables, at the end of the day, because it's like, I don't wait for somebody else to come in and make my life better, right? I feel like in the United States of America, we have the opportunity to make our lives better literally every single day. It doesn't matter what political party's in office, who's in office. There's an opportunity for you to go out there. It's not always easy. It's never going to be easy, but the opportunity's there. And, I try not to, I pay attention to what's going on, but I also try and stay in my own little bubble and know that, like, hey, as long as I'm hitting my daily metrics every single day, there's a higher likelihood of me succeeding in that regard.
Yeah, you just kind of be focused on day-to-day tasks, making sure you win your battles there. Then you could kind of branch out from there. You don't need to worry about, too much outside noise. Me and you have spoken about it. There's a lot of negativity out there. So if you keep listening to that, you won't get too far.
Yeah. And dude, that's exactly it, right? Like it's just constant, and it's so distracting at times. And, it's either everything's on fire, or it's, there's people bragging about how perfect and great their lives are. And it's all bullshit, right? On either end of the spectrum, it's all bullshit. And I feel like, for the most part, it's like the more you can kind of minimize your distractions and really put that time and effort into building out your business. I mean, that's something that you guys have done, right? Like you and your dad, when you guys started your company, you guys have just focused on the work more than anything. And I mean, how many trucks are you guys up to now?
We're 110 right now.
Holy shit, dude. That you've added even more. I think the last time we talked, you were at like 70.
Yeah, I can't remember. When was the last podcast? I think it was maybe a year ago.
Yeah, it was about that time, man. But dude, yeah dude, you've definitely added in. And I know we were we were texting because you've added in some flatbeds now. Is that where your guys' expansion has been in, or was it dry vans mostly?
No, flatbed was kind of, we added some of that. We expanded in that division as well, but it's been more dry van expansion than anything, to be quite honest.
So are you guys, for all the drivers and fleets that are out there, man, how are you managing your guys' freight? When you guys have as many trucks as you do now, are you going out and finding direct shippers, or are you still working with brokers?
It's a balance of everything, to be honest, man. I don't think, having the amount of, units and assets that we have, everything could be, direct freight. You're going to have to use your broker relationships, use your shipper relationships wherever you kind of go. It just gives you a, broader picture of of getting the truck back to where it needs to go and stuff like that. If you rely just on shipper freight, that's kind of tough. You never know when the shipper is going to have a load. Sometimes your driver needs to end up, in a certain spot before the shipper has a load. So it's both, to be quite honest. And we're open to having both, as a carrier. I mean, we understand brokers are a valued part of the community, and so are shippers. So ultimately, you need both.
No, I'm right there with you, man. I try my, as a broker myself, I try my best to do everything that we can inside of our company to take care of our driver partners. And, we talk about best practices a lot on this show. And, a lot of it for me is, we want to reuse the same carriers time and time again on our customers' freight, right? Like, I don't want to go out to a load board as much as I possibly can. I want to utilize it for what it's designed for, and that's to develop capacity. But then when I find that capacity, I want to stay off of the load board and reach out to these guys day in and day out with any available opportunities that come our way. Because, for the most part, man, a lot of when you're building up a business, as like you're trying to fill those gaps, right? Like there's never an influx of freight that just gets dropped into your lap and says, here's all of this business. It takes a long time to develop that, and it's going to come in different pockets of the country. And, one thing that we do that I'm really proud of from that perspective is man, we're always reaching out to our guys, no matter what part of the country it's in. If it's a step deck load and it's one of our verified, step deck carriers, we're reaching out to them no matter what, just to see like what's the chance that they're in that area. We want to give them that first right of refusal before just going out there and posting a load or trying to find somebody else.
Yeah, and it's easier for both parties, I feel like, involved. For you, it's easier, the trucking company or the driver that you're working with. And for us, it's easier, when we're working with a repetitive broker, shipper, because we built that relationship, we know each other, everything is nice when it's going perfect. But when a problem hits and, you have a relationship with the broker, sometimes it's easier to solve that problem with somebody you have a relationship with than rather, a guy that you just booked a load with randomly off the load board one time.
Yeah, I think for me, it's that buy-in of I need you to succeed as much as you need me to succeed style thing. And we're looking for a mutually beneficial partnership. And, I'm already starting to see this from the broker community, but I think it might be a little too late for some when it comes to actually adopting that mentality out there instead of railroading people and everything else to try and make an extra buck. And I feel like that's what this year, I think that's what this year might really breed a lot of is that behavior, right? If there's any sign of a change, and I feel like a lot of the weather that's hitting right now in Texas and in the South and stuff like that, I think those are those natural events that I'm talking about all the time, you guys, that when that happens, I mean, especially the state of Texas getting essentially shut down, that's going to have a massive ripple effect out there in the market. And then you're going to see spikes in prices. And then I just don't see them coming back down. I feel like that's how a lot of this is going to shift out and remain, right? And it's going to kind of be that slow and incremental bump up. But what you're going to see is I'd love to get your perspective on this as a fleet owner here. I think a lot of the way that this is going to transition is customers are going to try and dig their heels in as much as possible and not raise pricing at all. But it's gotten to the point now where carriers are going to start raising their rates and brokers' margins are going to get squeezed at that. What are you seeing out there from your perspective?
I mean, in peak season, we heard a lot of that, like, oh, we don't have that much money in this load and stuff like that. And you hear that, I feel like that's a go-to line for a lot of brokers.
Oh
I
yeah,
don't have that much money in this load, and maybe, they do, but I've definitely heard complaints that, with the market shifting, people don't have as much money in the load. They're losing money on the load. But I mean, ultimately, is that relationship worth keeping? You got to ask yourself as a broker, as a trucking company, are you going to lose money, 2 months out of the year to make money, 10 months? It's a bigger picture to that, I feel like. But definitely we've noticed, this peak season, it was tighter than, let's say, 3 years past. So it was kind of interesting market the past 3 years. You were basically relying off of your relationships, your contacts, but we definitely have seen more spot freight and new relationships pop up in the past maybe 6 months for sure.
So how are you guys really, setting yourselves up for success this year? Are you guys going to continue to do what you guys do? Because I mean, you guys have grown year over year. I mean, shit, man, since I met you in 2021, you guys have grown year over year over year. Do you feel like at this point you guys have your playbook and you're just going to continue to run that? Or, are you guys, maybe changing pace a little bit and you're going to focus more on business development to find that direct shipper relationship yourself?
I mean, we're going to focus on every aspect of the business. I feel like you need to be organized, first within your office, within your drivers, within your safety, compliance, and all of that stuff needs to be well organized before, shippers are going to even look at you. So I feel like we've focused on organization stuff with our drivers, with how our drivers perform, a little bit more managing from our side, the controllable factors. We focused on that this year so far. And then when it comes to business development, I mean, we're always looking for freight. I mean, it's a never ending type of thing in this industry. I mean, if you stop looking, ultimately, I feel like you're digging yourself a hole because you should never stop looking.
No, I'm right there with you, man. Are you finally, do you feel like your fleet is at a size now where maybe some of the enterprise level shippers out there are starting to take you guys more seriously as an actual provider? Because I mean, I feel like that's just the biggest unspoken thing that's out there. It's not that these large enterprise shippers don't want to work with trucking companies, but you have to have a volume capability for them to really entertain you, to set you up. Do you feel like your fleet is finally at that size now?
I feel like it's at that size, but you gotta definitely look at, fleet size and region you run. So maybe you could have 110 trucks in Denver. That doesn't mean you could take, a contract out of Pennsylvania, for example.
Yeah.
You definitely have to keep in consideration where you're running, where you're trying to get in. But definitely we've seen as we've grown that, since we have the capacity, that we get a little bit, more attention by, certain companies that have loads because it's a little bit more asset based, but also brokers for the same thing around. I mean, brokers love to use carriers with, when you can make one phone call and book 10 loads. I'm sure it makes me happy. It should make you happy too, so it's kind of a balance for sure.
Have you found that, you brought up, kind of knowing your region and stuff like that. Has that been a big factor in your guys' success in growing your company? Is kind of running those same regions and those repeat areas time and time again?
Yeah, and then we branch into sometimes the East Coast, Florida, and stuff like that. Over time you develop contacts even in those areas because you have repetitive trucks, so you know which maybe broker has a lane that's going to get you to another lane that could get you to Denver and stuff like that. But definitely, over the years, that I feel like that's developed they call it a footprint. So I feel like you develop your footprint, where you like to run, where your drivers like to run, where you pick up freight, that's developed, after a couple of years of entering this industry.
How do you think that might be something that more carriers should be adopting earlier on, is really identifying what's that footprint that you want to run? Would you advise people on that now that maybe they're looking to expand, or maybe, maybe it's just an owner op right now and they're kind of playing the spot market, right? And I truly believe this, man. Like, if you live on the spot market, you're going to die by the spot market, and you really got to develop that out. What is your advice to the driver community that's out there that might be an owner operator? Is it know your footprint?
I mean, if I was an owner operator in the current market, I wouldn't, as we would call it, wild west it. So just kind of run it wherever you feel like running. I would definitely keep into consideration even fuel prices in the areas that you run, along with the freight rates. So I mean, if you're gonna run just inner California, for example, when quoting inner California, you should know that you're going to pay maybe $6 to $7 a gallon for diesel. And stuff like that should be kept into consideration for owner ops and stuff like that. But I mean, if you live in California and you know how to quote it, and you live in those areas and you know how to quote it, I feel like you don't have a problem. I mean, we're pretty good about Denver inbound, Denver outbound. It's our niche. We're good at the western states as well. It's kind of gained by experience. I feel like you have to sometimes even fail to kind of learn. You're not gonna get all the answers in one day, I feel like.
Do you I'm glad you brought that up, because the longer I get in being self-employed, and it's like the faster you can realize that you've made a mistake, the better off you're going to be, as opposed, like, because at some point you just kind of got to cut the bait, but you also need to see the value in what you went through in that moment. Because like I'm a massive proponent of this statement, honest, and that's like I at this point I feel like it's almost more valuable to know what not to do than it is to what to do in a lot of instances.
Yeah, I mean, what not to do is a good way to look at it. But I mean, you're gonna make mistakes, and then being in the asset side, sometimes it's not even you that's making the mistake. That might be a broker scheduling a wrong appointment and your driver's mad at you. It might be a broker missing a delivery time and the broker's mad at you, or the shipper's mad at you. It's you got to keep a calm head, and I feel like that's very important in all of this. And sometimes that could be a weakness for us all, but if you keep a calm head and you look to solve the problem, I feel like that's 9 times. Once a mistake has happened, it's happened. But how you solve it after the mistake happened, it's important.
Do you think too many people are too quick to kind of like, I don't want to, I mean, I'm trying to think of the best way to put this, man. When there is a mistake, they're too quick to like pull people off loads, or, they make a small issue into a massive fucking problem?
Man, it's a loaded question. Sometimes people are quick to jump the gun. I'm not gonna lie. If they see a guy sitting, let's say, for an hour or 2 hours in the dock, and their pickup is 4 hours from now, we've seen people just pull you off the load because they don't think you're gonna make pickup on time. And we understand it. I mean, if it's your customer and you're nervous about making pickup on time, and you got to do what you got to do. It is what it is. But it's kind of, I feel like the market has something to do with that as well. If the market was a little bit more of an open market, how it was, let's say, in COVID or something like that, they wouldn't be as quick to jump the gun. But when stuff is tight, when customers are tight, it changes a lot of people's attitude on how they function.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. I think that it's, I've always said this, and I'll say this till I'm blue in the face, man. I think most brokers are their own worst enemy when it comes down to a lot of situations that they find themselves in, and it's their inability to act. It might be an experience thing, or, it's just quick to judge. But, I've always found that in every instance, as long as I'm out there doing what I need to do as a broker, i.e. actually verifying load details with your shippers, receivers, making sure everything's kind of in line, because, at the end of the day, man, I'm behind a computer all day long. Like, that's your literal job as a broker, and just to make sure in a lot of those instances. And I just think that, it is that quick to judge. I mean, there is a very big difference between, hey, man, listen, it's been 3 hours and you're still not touched. I need to get a driver recovered on this one, and then kind of pull it from there. But at the first sign of an issue, it's now you're off the load, man. Fuck you. We're going to put you not use now, too.
Yeah, you have a 4 p.m. pickup. My guy's getting empty at noon.
Yeah.
Why are you pulling me off the load type deal?
Yeah.
But I understand from your perspective, from the broker side. I mean, you see a guy sitting in a dock for 3 hours and nothing's happening. Of course, you got to call the guy, get word from him, and then do what you need to do. But if you have afternoon pickup, and I've definitely told you before I booked the shipment with you that my guy will be empty at this time.
Correct.
And still, the worst part is half the time that you're getting pulled off the load, it's not the guy that you booked the load with. It's some other branch of the company that sometimes you have struggle even understanding what they say when they pull you off the load. The only thing you understand is I'm going to take you off the load.
Yeah.
That's kind of tough.
What is one thing as a carrier you would like to see improved from the broker community going into 2025?
I feel like the guys that we deal with are pretty fair. But definitely for, one-off people that I've booked with recently, I feel like give a guy a chance to fix the problem before you jump to conclusions. I mean, at the end of the day, we're operating a fleet where we're dealing with another human behind the wheel. Mm-hmm. So working with that human, not everybody's going to work the same. Sometimes a driver could get 500 miles a day. Sometimes a driver could get 650 miles away. And especially in inclement conditions, not every driver drives the same in inclement conditions. So just giving a guy to fix the problem. I understand your freight needs to be there, but give me a chance to recover the load or relay the load before, causing a blow up situation. Always look to fix the problem before we blow up on each other. Because I've seen a lot of people, especially this year, and it was due to the economy. Economy is tight. They're quick to jump to conclusions. And I feel like that's not the way to do things.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think it kind of speaks to the fragility of relationships, and I use the term relationships very loosely here, that most brokers have with their customers in those moments. And, I feel like it unfairly to the carrier community. Sometimes you guys are picking up loads that that broker had failed upon already. And then, something happens, and it's more of, again, it's back to the broker being their own worst enemy. In that instance, it was an avoidable situation. And I've been there, right? Like I've been in a lot of situations over my career. And if I actually stopped to think about it, a lot of it was due to my own inaction in a lot of situations, or I was holding out for whatever reason. But, and I feel like at the end of the day, you guys end up bearing the brunt of all of that shit, that kind of goes on out there. What's something that you wish brokers would have a better understanding of when they are actually working with trucking companies? Because one thing that's very alarming to me is how little brokers actually know about a trucking company.
I mean, I've seen brokers. One thing that I've seen a common trend is brokers are quick to jump for that freight guard carrier 411 report.
Yeah.
I feel like that's, and we've been in business for like 9-10 years. We've never had, any reports put on us ever in those 10 years, but you definitely hear a lot of that word being thrown around, and for simple stuff, you have a truck caught in weather, the road's closed and your load's late. And that has more to do with, he's probably in hot water with his customer. You're under the microscope now because you have that load and you're kind of in that situation. But I feel like, being being a calmer guy, understanding there's 18 wheels on the road, that it's a human driving that truck, that, you know,
Mm-hmm.
you got to keep understanding for everything. It's going to go through cities where there's traffic. You're driving a truck, not necessarily Google Maps is going to give you an accurate idea how long it's going to get from Vegas to LA.
Yeah.
Google Maps might tell you 4 or 5 hours. With the truck, it might be 6, 7. So
Yeah.
just kind of keeping it real. If we're going to be honest, with both parties, and I know there's carriers that probably, do the same thing. Oh, I'm empty here, but he accepts tracking. The truck's 250 miles away, and
Yeah.
there's from both sides. I feel like I would like to reverse that question on you. What do we as carriers need to do, better for brokers to have easier life?
And I look at it as, just that open and honest communication is really what it boils down to me, right? Like if you can't do something for whatever reason, like I've been doing this for too long now to ever even mention the word freight guard in most situations, like, or any situations, at the end of the day, like, I don't talk about a lot of the scenarios that I've been in because I feel like it doesn't benefit anybody. But, we've had a situation where there was some damage done to a load. The carrier denied any wrongdoing, but to save face with the customer, I just paid it out of my pocket and we made the issue go away. I didn't go and put a freight guard report out there against the company because they picked up on time, they delivered on time, they communicated well. At the end of the day, shit happens in this industry and it's not worth my time to go down that rabbit hole on who's right or who's wrong. It's just easier to pay it and move on with my day and save face with the customer because
we're asked the guy from your side, are you willing to split the cost?
Yeah.
Yeah. If it's something, if it's a guy that I work with, 8 to 9 times a week that I have a relationship and there's one problem on one load, I'm going to even look to help you out in that situation. I'm not.
More times than not, that's what happens, right? But in this instance, it didn't. But, again, at the end of the day, we're just going to pay it and move on. We're going to protect that relationship because what I don't want to happen is have my customer have to deal with the shitty outcome of this. It's just easier to kind of read. And, again, I read the room. I was the one who was spearheading the conversations. Yeah. I knew the way. I've been down this road before, and I'm not going to spend days over that. It's just easier to cut bait and then move on. But, I think ultimately, though, honest, it's always just going to boil down to communication, right? Like if you can't make transit time for whatever reason, just let me know, like it's easier for me to communicate with my customer of a delay than have me not find out about it for whatever reason, like if there's a blowout or whatever happens, just let me know. I need to deal with it. I don't want to do the run around and everything else that comes along with it. But a lot of these scenarios that people complain about, honest, are seemingly go away if you're working with the same carriers time and time again. Because again, they're bought into your business. They don't want you to suffer because then they suffer, right? And you kind of see that reciprocal relationship that goes on out there. It's not always easy, but every situation I find myself in, even to this day, man, I say, hey, the only way that this doesn't work out is if we stop talking. As long as we're communicating with each other, everything's going to work out in the long run.
Of course. Yeah, I mean, communication is always important, from both sides. I feel like carriers, I mean, we started doing, especially with the winter cold the last 2 weeks. I mean, we just started telling people in ahead of time, we're going to probably deal with weather this week. So we'll keep you in communication, but we get ahead of, that communication as quickly as we can. But sometimes, we expect the driver to get there, driver runs that hours, let's say maybe an hour out from delivery, and then next morning flies by, and then there's an 8 a.m. delivery in the morning, and you're getting to the office, and maybe that 8 a.m. delivery got cut short due to hours. There's some of that stuff that happens. But, carrier's job is to communicate that. And that's why, we put in place after hours, we put in place, multiple people and multiple teams, tracking and tracing the driver. We've done a lot of stuff just to, kind of minimize issues and kind of get ahead of those issues as quickly as we can, just so you could avoid a headache as the customer / broker, and we as the carrier don't lose time, let's say, waiting for a reschedule, a lumper to be paid, or stuff along those lines.
What's your opinion on broker transparency, man? Like it's making a comeback. It was very loud of like 3 years ago, and now it's seemingly gained some traction. I mean, President Trump all but ended any discussion of it for a while now because he put a pause on any new rules and regulations across the federal government entirely. But from your perspective, man, like what do you feel about this? I mean, I have my opinions on it, but at the end of the day, I'm not always right. I'd love to hear what you think.
I mean, I look at it from both sides. From a carrier side, it would be in benefit of the carriers. For the broker side, I feel like it's unfair from your guys's side of the business, because every customer is different. Every piece of freight is different. If a market is a market on a certain lane, and you find a customer that you get a better rate with on that lane, and you're ultimately selling it at a fair price, then it's cool with me if you're making, let's say, more than average on that lane, because that was your customer. You negotiated that. And I feel like it's a two-sided sword,
Yeah. I think that, with obviously it's a point of contention, in the industry, and nothing like that. When somebody feels like they're getting the short end of the stick, it never bodes well for any parties involved. And, it's like the more, like, obviously the rule that everybody's talking about was, instituted in like the 1980s. And I feel like one glaring oversight by a lot of individuals is how freight is procured now as opposed to how it was back when that law was put into place, where back then, you would hire me to find freight on your behalf directly, and I would be like the only broker that you would work with in a lot of those instances, right? Where you would hire me specifically to do that, where I feel like now the roles have reversed, right? Where carriers are now contacting brokers for freight. So, I think at the end of the day, like whatever happens in Washington, D.C. is out of my control, whatever kind of comes about with it. But I just look at it as like, at the end of the day, how do you benefit by knowing how much money I make on a load? And then what stops you from taking said information, going directly to a shipper in those instances, right? But again, like ultimately, does knowing what I make on a load make you more profitable in your business? Does that make you all of a sudden run a more efficient operation?
You as a carrier ultimately have the final call, whether you're going to take that load or whether you're not going to take it. If you don't like the price, don't take the load. That's how I feel about it. I mean, it would be interesting, don't get me wrong. I mean, to see what people actually have in certain loads. I mean, there was some articles that I read before back in the day where they were getting maybe $4 a mile on a lane, and they were selling it to a carrier for $2.25. Those articles have came out. We've seen that's done, and people call that. They were calling it almost like a price gouging type of deal with the carrier. But I mean, ultimately, the carrier had that final call whether he's going to take it. If the carrier feels like that's profitable within his business network, he's the final word there, in my opinion.
Yeah. Again, I'm not in everybody, and I don't work with every single shipper in the United States of America. I don't know everybody's numbers, and frankly, everybody else's numbers is irrelevant. My business's numbers is all I'm really concerned about. But when I see claims of some people making 40, 50, 60% margins on loads, the competitive nature, and again, this is just coming from my seat as a broker who actually quotes freight every single day. I think that would be extremely hard to do in today's environment, in today's climate. I really do. Just knowing how competitive it is out there, and knowing how many providers a lot of customers work with. And then again, you look at today's climate, freight volumes are what they are. Capacity is high. Like, I know for a fact on the loads that I'm bidding on, I know for a fact what I'm bidding. and we're being told that we're not even within $400 or $500 of what they actually paid on that load. So, you know, again, I just have it from my perspective. I'm not a fan of anybody getting, you know, taken advantage of at all. But again, I can only control what I can control. And that's what I'm going to continue to do. I just feel like these claims of 50 to 60% margins are completely blown out of the water and unsubstantiated. And that just comes from my seat of somebody who actually bids on freight every single day. I know how competitive it is out there, and I would be hard pressed for anybody to be able to do that multiple times.
It's almost, I feel like that's almost like you asking a carrier, you know, from your side, what's your break-even cost? Yeah. So I can sell you this load, you know, where you're it's kind of the same thing. No, if we don't have to share that info, you know, why do you have to share that info? Because it's kind of almost the same thing.
No, dude, I get it. Well, hey, man, I appreciate you joining me. I always appreciate your candor, you know, our friendship first and foremost, but like, I love having you come on, man, because I feel like I get the no bullshit, no emotional response to a lot of stuff because like you're out there actually doing it, man. You know, at the end of the day, it's your actions that matter the most. But dude, are you guys hiring drivers, anything like that? How can anybody reach out to you guys to find out more?
We're hiring drivers. Feel free. You know, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm active on LinkedIn. Add me up there and, you know, reach out to me if you're interested, you know, in drivers, or if you're a broker looking to make a relationship, customer looking to make a relationship. We're based out of Denver. We're running in and out of Denver. So we do whatever it takes to get your freight there on time and safely.
I love it, man. Anes, thank you so much for joining me. And if you guys can't find him for whatever reason, hit me up. I will gladly put you guys in contact with him. As always, if you guys got value in what you heard, subscribe to the show. If you're feeling really ambitious about it, rank the show on iTunes and Spotify, because that's how we reach more people. And that's because if you saw value, chances are you're going to see value as well. I appreciate you guys. I love you guys. And we'll be talking to you soon.